Do you miss the days of waking up on Saturday morning, lying around in your PJs, and tuning in to the latest episode of your favorite shows? Well, so do we. Welcome to the SatAM Club, where we take a look at the Saturday mornings of days past. Welcome to the SatAM Club. Welcome everybody to another edition. I am delighted today to be joined by two wonderful friends of mine. We've got Lyrica of Lyrical Cosplay.
Hello.
And the one and only resident Canadian of the KFM gang. I shouldn't say that because now I have two Canadians. But Mr. Enzo, thank you for joining us once again.
Hey, pleasure to be here.
So, today we took a look at two programs from ABC's 1994 Saturday morning cartoon lineup. So, 1994, almost 30 years ago, which, you know, it's a little crazy to think about now. And we're going to get into some interesting things talking about the time period in particular today. But let's set the scene. What was happening in 1994?
Harding's ex-husband, her bodyguard, and two men are charged with plotting the attack on Nancy Kerrigan. All of them are out on bail. Tanya herself says that she did not know a thing about the attack.
Kurt Cobain, the leader of one of rock's most gifted and promising bands, Nirvana, is dead.
When I find you.
Pop quiz, hotshot. There's a bomb on a bus. Once the bus goes 50 miles an hour, the bomb is armed. If it drops below 50, it blows up.
O.J. Simpson, one of our most public figures even before this week's incredible events, is now one of our most wanted ever. The football star, movie star, TV sports analyst, commercial pitchman is described as armed and dangerous, possibly suicidal, and if found, he could face the death penalty for the murders of Nicole Simpson and Ronald Goldman. There is nothing like this in memory.
I'm a loser, baby, so why don't you kill me?
You know what they call a quarter pounder with cheese in Paris?
They don't call it a quarter pounder with cheese?
Oh man, they got the metric system. They wouldn't know what the fuck a quarter pounder is.
And what do they call it?
They call it a Royale with cheese.
What's interesting one of the interesting things to me about 1994 is we are 3 years into the World Wide Web. The World Wide Web came out in 1991. And that, saying all that and looking at what's happened in 1994 and setting the scene of the time takes us into the first show that we watched today, which was Reboot, a classic of the 90s. That exactly, our good friend Mr. Enzo knows quite a bit about, we've discovered here. When I brought up the concept of doing Reboot, I got a message of, you have to do Reboot, and Enzo has to be on it. So,
I wonder why.
I mean...
Yeah, exactly.
My husband born.
Yeah, so, if, for those unaware, there is a character named Enzo in Reboot.
And that's what the episode we watched was all about, basically.
Was about, his first birthday, if I caught that right. So Reboot, let's set a little bit for those who are not in the know. Reboot has, what I would consider a distinctive style of the era, which we're going to get into here in our conversation in a bit. It was an early representation in animation of the concept of what life would be like in a digital world, so to speak, right? A lot of ways, like, the thing that kept running through my mind about it is it felt like you took the concept of something like Tron and then you made it animated and moved it a little bit into a more modern, at the time, era, you know? With its own shtick, you know, with its own things, of course. I'm not saying it's a one-for-one comparison, but it's the best comparison I have, especially for those who are unfamiliar with the series. So, I'll say it was an interesting episode that we watched. It was fun. I will give it that. It was definitely a fun episode to watch. It was Enzo's first birthday, and they were planning a surprise for Enzo in the episode. And meanwhile, you had basically, I cannot remember, Enzo, you can help me. The character, the other male lead, who was that Bob?
Bob.
His name is Bob.
Guardian Bob.
How did I not pick up on Bob?
Guardian Bob.
But Bob was basically trying to keep him away from their planning of the festivities. And what's interesting, too, is if you didn't pick up on the birthday part at first, it almost looked like they were auditioning acts for a talent show, right?
And now, the Dyer, Sal, and Harv.
Oh, is it just me, Em, or are these acts getting worse?
The episode's called Talent Night.
There we go. But it was like a talent, they were searching for talent, but it was for the birthday. So it wasn't really a talent show, but it was interesting. So, it was mostly fun. The big villain of the series, Megabyte, did have a little bit to do in it. But it was a little confusing, and we'll get to that here. But I'll say this. Overall, let's talk first about... actually, I'm going to give the floor to Enzo, because you know a little bit of history about this episode. So I wanted to give you the floor for a minute to talk about a little behind the scenes, like what kind of like the point of the episode was, so to speak. Because we talked a little bit about it while we watched it, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to set the scene for the discussion here.
All right. Well, we can just talk about Reboot in general. So, basically, this episode was season 1. It was in season 1, so the first season of Reboot. There were 4 seasons altogether. Basically, Reboot did start in 1994. So, a lot of the episodes came out in that year. And as Ford mentioned, this episode was basically planning a celebration of young kid Enzo, the young kid in the show, his first birthday. And his sister Dot was planning it. So a lot of the episode revolves around Dot and a companion named MSC, who acted like a censor, which we'll go into more detail later on, watching these different acts to see what would work for the show for Enzo's birthday. And of course, a lot of because MSC's acting as a show censor, and kids shows back in the day, 90s, had a lot of restrictions, so to say, and she didn't like a lot of the acts. The B plot was Enzo being distracted from going back to the stage, and Bob continuously having to entertain him in a way, and Enzo's eventually starting to get tired. I want to go back. I'm getting hungry, and eventually ends up with a large show at the end involving the villain, who is kind of watching everything go down and acts like he's going to plan some big surprise because all the mainframe denizens are together. This is a perfect scheme for him. Ends up being a large guitar duel. So, that's a synopsis of the episode. It is very silly, probably one of the sillier episodes of Reboot. The other episodes, there is silliness involved, especially in season 1 episodes, but they don't go silly to the point that the villain is basically in a guitar duo with the main good guy in the show.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's definitely, it was definitely silly, because like at the end when it came up and he just pulls out a guitar, I was like, this is his master plan.
Yeah. Even in the episode, Dot still thinks that Megabyte's going to do something evil and tells everyone to get down and cover their ears as he cranks up to 11.
Because like the whole time I thought about it, I was like, is like it like some kind of weird like control riff or some weird random thing that they would put in? Because like, okay, we all again like this always shows when I end up doing work on things from another franchise, it ends up coming to show that we are from the Brony community. But the parallel that I was thinking at the time was like the Dazzlings from Rainbow Rocks, where that's what I was expecting, is he would come out with something very similar to their type of plan, but it was just this weird guitar duel between him and Bob, which, can I just say, it's interesting to watch a guitar materialize like that, all digitally and stuff, which that was actually kind of a cool effect. I will give it props for that.
You talking about the Bob's guitar?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was he has a little thing called a key tool. It can transform to anything. It can do anything.
That's cool.
BFG 1000.
Mm-hmm. Oh my god, yeah, BFG, and I was like, is it big freaking guitar? Like, because the BFG gun, right? Like,
so from a technical standpoint, because they can't say big guitar, they actually, in the background, I think in the script, they actually refer to it as the Big Fender guitar. So that way the censors allow them to do it.
Well, and you were saying, and I wanted to give you a moment to speak on this, about this episode kind of brings into the forefront things that dealing with network censorship, their own battles in creating the show and dealing with network censorship and approval. So I know you were talking about that, so I want to give you a moment to speak on that.
So, as a children's show, they had to censor. They had to deal with censors, and the big company. So, the main company that was dealing with Reboot was ABC at the time, and they had censorship called BSNP, Broadcast Standards and
Practices.
I forget.
Standards and Practices.
Broadcast Standards and Practices. So they would basically get the episode from the producers and say, this is okay, you can't do this, you can't do this. For example, there was one, I think in the second episode of Reboot, Bob was supposed to smash through a window and save Dot. And of course they say, no, you can't have Bob smashing through a window, that's not safe. So he uses glitch to get to the window. He literally says through glitch, BSMP, the window kind of just opens up and lets him through.
So this is like a dare I say, almost like a running gag, huh?
Yes, yeah. So
I'm all for running gags. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Lyrica.
I was just saying, I'm all for that.
Yeah, seriously.
The entirety of season 1 has a load of gags to poke fun at BSMP. This episode specifically is the big one. That pokes fun at them. They even have a band called BSNP.
Oh my gosh! It was basically the Village people making fun of network standards and practices.
Cause we're living with BSNP. Yeah, we're living with BSNP.
Honestly, like, it's not the first show that's done anything like this, of course, by any stretch of the imagination, but it's definitely one that, like, I think that was one of the strongest points of the episode for me, because I'm all for when you have those little nods and such, and when we were kids, we wouldn't have seen it as much, but as an adult, I knew that acronym. I knew it immediately. Like, I was like S&P. Like, it's funny because while Nova Rose isn't actually joining us for the recording today because she isn't feeling the greatest, but she did actually join us to watch the episodes. And I remember at one point I was like laughing my butt off at that, and I looked, and Rose was like, "What?" And I was like, "S&P stands for Standards and Practice. It's the whole thing with the network." And she was like, "Oh, I get it now."
There's a lot of references, not even just this episode, but items that only adults would get. When I was watching this episode as a kid, sometimes I'm like, I don't get that. I don't understand what this. I didn't understand the Sal and Harv reference, which was referring to Dire Straits. Which I'm gonna diverge a bit here. They made a reference to Dire Straits, Money for Nothing. The music video was a CGI video made by Mainframe Entertainment, who also made Reboot.
I did not know that. That's amazing.
Yep.
And that video is a classic video of the 80s, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. One of the first CGI videos, and so made by Mainframe Entertainment, who made Reboot. So they're almost poking fun at themselves.
So let's get into since we brought up CGI, I want to talk about the look of the show, because let's say this. I think we can all agree it's very much a look that's of the time that it came from. Reboot falls in this interesting thing. It's early 90s. We're only 3 years into the World Wide Web. So we're really only starting to get into things like AOL and browsers and whatnot. This is the early days of this. So it was basically, this is one of those kind of very telling pieces of media at the time. There's a very much like how do we represent the burgeoning world of the World Wide Web on film and animation? And on top of that, how do we incorporate using CGI? How do we incorporate using the computers themselves to tell the stories? And it's one of the things where it's like it's very easy for somebody, I think, to go in and look at it right now and be like, oh my God, look at that. But I feel like that's a little unfair because at the time, this was like the limits of what the technology could do for us. Let's face it, right?
Yep.
But
hell, I mean, they even reference that with the primitives.
Yeah, that's and so it's there's some character designs that I would say are very blocky, intentionally so though.
The binomes were, I think they were made specifically for that reason, so that the ones that are squares and circles, it makes it a lot easier for them instead of having a whole bunch of human characters, which they start using more human characters in season 3 and so forth when they can actually get more computing power. But I think that's the reason why they stuck with these, what they call binomes, make it easier for them to animate.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Like, you have to take shortcuts in animation. It's just a reality. I mean, and sometimes great things come of it. I mean, heck, that's how we got Derpy Hooves in My Little Pony, is through shortcut animation errors.
Yep.
So, all right, so let's, a couple other things that I wanted to dive into with the episode. Overall, I think it was fine. It was fun. It was very much of the time. It's hard. I can't imagine somebody stumbling into it nowadays with the way it looks comparatively. Like, you have to basically have that open mind. Yeah. But overall, I think it was rather fun. I think the voice acting was great in it. I wanted to say that. The voice acting was stellar. I forget the name, and I'll put it on screen when we edit this here. But the name of Tony, is it Joe? Okay, anyway.
Tony J.
Tony J, yes, that played
Tony
Megabyte. Brilliant. And especially, it's funny because this film came out in 1994. This episode was 1994, the same year The Lion King came out. Tony J's portrayal of Megabyte gives me such Jeremy Irons as Scar vibes, right?
Yeah. And I will say, one of the things I put in my notes is, as soon as I saw Megabyte, my first thought was very early Beast Wars Megatron.
It really just went there. And that was, I was all for that. That was one of the big things all around. There's one other element I wanted to get into, which was the song number from the end of the episode. Which...
You mean Dots?
He's alright. He's okay. He's the sprite that brightens our day. There's no doubt, girls, you better watch out. He's alphanumeric.
Okay, so this is going to be a random reference. What it gave me vibes of is there is a Star Trek Deep Space Nine episode where there is a hologram of Major Kira singing the song Fever to Odo, and it's all sensual and weird and old-timey, and it gave me vibes of that, because she walks around giving everyone the eye. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone. Including the one she probably shouldn't, right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Um,
Speaking of Star Trek, how about that Captain Quark?
Packed my bags last night, pre-flight. 0 hour 9 a.m. And I'm gonna be high as a kite by then.
Yeah, Captain Quark. I don't, I would love to see Quark captaining a Ferengi ship. I digress, though.
No one's a planet.
Armin Shimmerman would totally be down for it. I bet you, too. Armin Shimmerman totally would. He came back to Star Trek this year, literally. So,
yep.
Anyway, so overall, though, I think Reboot, let's put it this way. Does it hold up visually? Technically, no. But I don't think you can expect anything that tried to do what Reboot did to hold up visually to this day. Because it's I look at it this way. Reboot walked so the next CGI series that came after could run, right? But yeah, otherwise though, other than a little bit of a creepy vibe from a couple of things, I think it's fun overall. There were some good nods, a good binary joke in there. I think overall the content holds up.
Sorry. Do you know what he said? What the joke was?
Oh my gosh, you know what it translates to? What is it?
Yep. Take my wife, please.
That's great. I love it. Alright. So, alright, that was Reboot. So, after Reboot, we watched Tales from the Crypt Keeper. So, for those unaware, there was a show on, I believe it was HBO once upon a time, called Tales from the Crypt with the Crypt Keeper. He had that weird. That's about it.
Yeah, I grew up watching that.
And so, what Tales from the Crypt was, it was a puppet. The Crypt Keeper was a puppet. It was a large animatronic puppet who would introduce various vignettes of horror stories. So, and it was pretty popular. It ran for a little while back in the day. So, what they did was they took that idea and said, okay, how can we make this all ages, essentially, and made a cartoon version of it called Tales from the Crypt Keeper. So, we watched an episode of that. The first thing I want to talk about with it is, like I said, in the live action, the Crypt Keeper is a puppet, and it's like this fun little skeleton ghoul thing. I don't think it translated as well to animation, personally. No.
Howdy, cowboys and cowghouls. Welcome to Tombstone, my favorite town. It's not the liveliest place, but certainly says something for old Worm Charm.
In the episode we watched, he was in the Wild West.
He was the sheriff.
Yeah, he was the sheriff in the Wild West. And I guess that was the thing is being able to do the animation portion instead of what we had, I guess would give it the feel like where they would have more freedom what to do with it because it's not a puppet, so they can move it around everywhere. But I almost feel like you lose the novelty in that. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. It just like he looked so awkward. And I will say he was still the Crypt Keeper. The voice was pretty on point. He was making the puns. Mm-hmm. Like the Crypt Keeper would make a ghoul pun like there's nobody's business, right? The thing I remember most about the Crypt Keeper is the laugh, and that he would make a pun out of anything ghoulish, ghost, death, anything having to do with horror. He would turn it into a pun somehow.
Kind of like in this episode, he dropped the new genders.
Yeah.
Cowboys and cowboys.
Mm-hmm. So. And it was, but like, then it, so it starts with a little vignette of him, and then it gets into this episode. And now, the major context of the horror story within it was weird, because as far as horror stories go, it was like the least horror of horror stories I may have ever seen.
It wasn't, I didn't get any sense of being scared. It was more like, okay, what's going on? And then it just ended up being kind of a escape story, really.
Really,
well, I will say.
Mm-hmm.
The monsters, they were just chihuahuas.
Yeah, they weren't.
No, they're not.
The creatures weren't, and sometimes you can do a psychological horror piece where the threat of the villain or of the monster is more scary than the monster itself. Case in point being something like Cloverfield, right? Where you don't actually see the monster itself, but you see everyone reacting to it, and that's where the horror element comes in. That's where the fear comes in. So I get that. This did not do
it. I would say I found the story regarding the grandmother to be
the most interesting part.
Interesting. The most interesting part.
Yeah, there was this. It was
not grandmother, aunt.
It was the aunt, but let's face she's older. The character is older, so it's kind of like you think granny. And I think the lesson of the episode, so to speak, is that I think it was very much a don't judge a book by its cover. Like the aunt could fend for herself in the end was, I think, the idea, even though she was an older woman, which is a great message, but it's. And maybe there is that, because we talked in a previous episode about one of the acts that Congress came down with in America, at least, was about trying to, at some point, I want to say in the 90s, but there was a thing to try to keep kids from being marketed to as much. And I think the idea was they wanted to put more like, okay, like, if you're gonna have shows that market to kids, like, you at least have to have redeeming content and to learn lessons and stuff. To get it away from, let's face it, the 80s, and we're gonna do more 80s episodes coming up, but you had G.I. Joe, My Little Pony, Transformers. It was like, everything was, buy our toys, buy our toys, buy our toys, buy our toys. And again, like, we can Power Rangers is on the agenda for a future episode, by the way, but I digress.
Let me add on Power Rangers.
Yes.
Cosmic Fury was fun. That's the newest and latest.
Okay.
It is. It's good.
So,
anyways,
point being, we had. So I think that may have suffered from that almost. It's weird because, like, we're talking about children's entertainment, and it's kind of taken a while for us to get to our modern. I don't want to say we live in a golden age, but at least like the early 2020s, the late 2010s, we had this. I'd say the 2010s was almost a golden age of animation because of like, especially for children's content, because we were getting a lot of content where it didn't treat kids like idiots, so to speak, you know? And even if it was marketing to them, it was still intelligent. Things like shows like My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, shows like DuckTales 2017, The Owl House, Amphibia, all these great shows that were kids programming, but the whole family could watch it together, and it didn't treat its characters one-dimensionally, and it basically said, like, hey kids, like, we understand you can appreciate a three-dimensional character and more of a story here. But it took us sloshing through all these eons of not having that, right, to get here.
Oh, for sure.
So I think my guess, I feel like this is just suffering from it at the time. I think there's two things. And there's some redeeming qualities, like the aunt was great, the old guy who looked like an old-timey prospector almost, who was lost in the mines.
I called the twist there.
You really did. You called it.
It was too obvious.
Yeah.
The twist was obvious.
So, but that was a lot, you know, like, I had no problem with a lot of it. I just felt like the stakes were low. It didn't land what it was trying to do. I honestly think that it suffered from, how do I put this? Like, going from, like, because, I mean, while the HBO show was like, it's still kitschy. So I get where they thought they could do it, but I think going from a show on a platform where you could do almost anything on HBO to going to kids programming and having to deal with standards and practices again.
Yeah.
I feel like it almost by default had to dilute the product, right?
Yeah.
So I'll say this. I mean, anything else that jumped out at you guys from the episode?
I mean, I'll be honest, it's pretty forgettable.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, I completely forgot there was even a cartoon based on the show.
Yeah, the thing is, I didn't really watch it back in the day, but I remember Tales from the Crypt. Like, so I didn't watch Tales from the Crypt Keeper, but I remember Tales from the Crypt, and I remember the cartoon being around. So when I started doing research for this week, I saw this, and I was like, this should be fun. And it was okay. Like, really, it's okay. I'm not taking a crap on it. I really think that it's just like a matter of just unfortunate circumstance. I feel like there is an interesting premise there, and I feel like if somebody went and remade it in 2023 on a streaming service with more flexibility, I feel like it could actually be quality content, right? Like as an animated series.
Yeah.
All right. Now, let's get into... I know Lyrica has notes here on these. Let's talk about the commercials we saw from 94, y'all. So, another one. I had another excitement moment. I had this in a previous episode. I remember the Burger King Kids Club. And I loved those things. And it had nothing to do with Burger King or the meals. It didn't even make me like them more. It just made me want the toys, and the Kids Club was just something that just stuck out as like, oh, I remember like seeing this back in the day and thinking like, oh, these kids are cool.
Yeah.
Did you get a card with? Don't you get a card?
It depends.
It's like a little cardboard card you can cut out.
Yeah.
Or
So, oh my gosh, yes, you're right. I remember it now.
you get you get a card. They would give you a card with it as like.
Yes, and you were part of the club. Oh my goodness, yes. I remember y'all. Here's another one that's. I'm sure this will bring this up again, when we do the 4Kids episode. But when Burger King had the Pokemon toys with the little gold cards.
Yep.
Yeah. But go ahead, Lyrica.
Besides the obvious Kid Vid, do you remember any other character names?
No.
There was Jaws. IQ was the nerdy one.
I remember that. See, now that you're saying it, these are all like, I'm remembering.
The dog was JD. That's the only ones I remember by name.
You remember more than me. That's impressive. Because like I was all about them. All right, so what else stuck out to you, Lyrica?
All right, so how about the most 90s Pringles ad ever?
Yes! Oh my gosh, it was like just like, oh, okay. So here's the thing we brought up before in another conversation. Isn't it interesting to look at 30 years ago and go, we didn't use sensitive light flashing warnings back then.
Nope.
And that Pringles commercial was totally it, right?
Yep.
And now I'm just thinking to myself, do I edit the commercial in because of that? I actually have to consider that. How about that? And the difference in time. But it was very much like, we did 90s before in the pilot, and 90s, and this is still of that time, 90s was very much like extreme. It was loud colors. I mean, just I like, for those watching at home, look at the side and the colors I used for the logo. Those are all intentional because those were the colors of the time. It was very loud and in your face, and that Pringles ad was so it.
Yep.
Well, I recall like a lot of the kids' commercials were about like getting in your face, screaming, excitement. They wanted to grab you. That's they wanted to grab you. That's all 90s ads were about.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then the commercial after that unlocked a core memory for me. The Captain Crunch Crunchling Adventure game.
Yes, because I didn't have the games, but you and Rose said that you both had the games.
Oh yeah. My parents still have my CD of it.
That's awesome. Like, I think I have a vague, very vague memory of it existing, but I never did it myself.
Scruff McGruff.
Scruff McGruff. McGruff the crime dog, take a bite out of crime. And this was, these were the animated ones, because they were animated, but they were also like a weird, wasn't there like at one point a weird like live action?
Hybrid.
Yeah.
Probably.
This one was just purely animated, and it had his, what, was it his nephew? The little dog, I forget what his name is, because he's McGruff, and he's got it's McGruff and Scruff, I think. But I still, like, those stick out to me from childhood. Those were all the time. I don't know whatever happened to McGruff. I think they just retired him eventually, but
yeah.
Because like the McGruff holds that spot in my brain next to the Dare program from the time period, you know.
Yep.
And you had Dare, and we had Canadian PSA commercials.
Mm-hmm.
Those were something. I think those are things you should possibly show in a future.
I am like.
Those were.
Oh yeah, the PSAs are interesting. Because I remember the PSAs, and I know this is gonna sound messed up, but I don't remember ever taking any of them seriously. You know?
No, they very, very significantly over-exaggerated.
And even when I saw them, like, if anything, I feel like, for the most part, it made me want to not do what they were telling me to do.
What they're trying, well, especially Canadian. I'm sure we'll have to watch the Canadian PSAs. You can find them on YouTube easily.
Oh yeah.
They are nightmare fuel. They are pure nightmare fuel, meant to just. They were just weird, and some of them just outright scary, and like, holy jeez, they actually aired this on TV.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little too much. But anyways, I digress.
The next one started with a good old Charles Entertainment Cheese.
Yes, Charles Entertainment Cheese. It was very much. I remembered that ad, seeing that ad as a kid.
Oh yeah.
Chuck E. Cheese, like, just he lives rent free in my brain now. Permanently.
Oh, for sure.
Like, that rat just permanently lives there.
Much better than the redesign they did.
Poggers!
Where they turn him into basically Stuart Little.
It's interesting. I mean, granted, the original Chuck E. Cheese smoked a cigar, so the difference is night and day, right?
Yeah.
The original one looked like, I swear to God, he looked like Milton Berle as a mouse.
Yeah.
But, yeah, Chuck E. Cheese definitely, that one stuck. Chuck E. Cheese always felt like a special, like, occasion to me as a kid. Like, nowadays, I see that, like, I can get to one in 10 minutes, like 15 minutes from my place. But, like, when I was a kid, it was very special, because we didn't have any in my community either. So it always...
Same.
It seemed like the coolest thing ever. And of course, like, the irony being eventually would find I was lactose intolerant and stop eating pizza like that. So
after that, we had the super awesome Jurassic Park toys.
Jurassic Park, oh my gosh, when that came out, it was everything. I remember
those toys were the best.
a lot of us got really into dinosaurs as kids because of Jurassic Park.
Dinosaurs, extreme dinosaurs.
I remember getting I loved Dilophosaurs after the movie, after the spoiler alert for a movie that's 30 years old, after the Dilophosaur sprays Wayne Knight in the face. Yeah, I was all about that as a kid.
Yeah. So yeah, after that, the one that did not age well at all, Jello.
Oh. That didn't age well.
Here's the thing.
That one didn't age well.
Here's the thing. And I knew this was going to come up at some point in doing this. Because
I mean, he was big thing in the 90s.
In the late 80s into the early 90s, Cosby was king, y'all. It's almost impossible, like, to underscore for those who weren't around to live it and just understand it. I guess honestly, the best parallel that I can find nowadays is people like to understand what Michael Jackson was back in the day and what Bill Cosby was. Now, somebody I think today who would be my parallel, and it's somebody who we don't have a drama, and I hope, pray to the gods that she doesn't get into one. But it's how Beyonce is nowadays, where Beyonce is just queen and we've all accepted it. That's how it was back in the day, where Cosby was king. Or
Taylor Swift might be more accurate.
Maybe, I guess. I don't know. I guess.
You gotta remember, Bill was America's dad.
Yeah, Bill Cosby was America's dad. The Cosby Show, and let me say this too, despite what we know now and what happened, and especially given the fact I live in Pennsylvania, so this all came back to my state in the end.
Yep.
The trial happened an hour and a half away from me, so
Yeah.
But despite that, the Cosby Show actually taught good lessons and was a good show. It's unfortunate, obviously, what we know happened, but there were, but because of that, Jell-O. And Jell-O was primarily advertised towards kids with it. So,
yep.
And you find yourself going, ugh, just gritting your teeth and just cringing.
Just get through it. It.
But you'll have to understand that at the time, it made more sense than anything in the world.
Oh, yeah.
So, I'm not saying it's good. Obviously, what he did was terrible. Terrible. I have no respect for anybody who does anything even remotely similar to those types of actions. But, it's important to frame the thing of the time when we're looking at this and going, it's not Jell-O's fault what happened, essentially. You know what I mean?
After that, we had the M&M boot camp.
Yeah, so M&M's. Okay, that was a good point. I wanted to talk M&M's. So this was interesting because it was fully animated, no live action, different voice actors than what we're accustomed to in the live action. So this was before we had what is it? I think it's Billy Crystal and Patrick Warburton, right, or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and which. Can we just say those are major freaking names to just be voicing little candies in the commercial? But they've been doing it for so long. I don't know if it's still... Vanessa Williams at least used to voice the green M&M. I don't know if she still does. But it was different. It was very different because it's not the M&Ms I'm used to, but it was still them and their characters for the most part in the commercial.
Yep.
It's crazy how... something so simple, I'm literally talking about the characters of a animated variation of a piece of chocolate candy that's only in commercials, and I'm talking about their character development. What does that say?
Good marketing.
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even eat M&Ms that much anymore, but although almond M&Ms are the stuff of the gods. Anyway.
Melt your mouth, not your hand.
After that, we had one that I'm pretty sure you won't care for, but I have fond memories of the Flavor Ranch.
Oh, that's fine. I geeked out at that at first because I remember all the different types of...
The taco was my favorite.
Yeah, the taco ranch and the pizza ranch and stuff, and I don't even remember eating them, but I certainly remember them existing. And those are always... It's weird in this, because I'm finding... doing this, we've done these for a few weeks straight now, and I found that when I do that, I get excited over, if I remember it, I get excited,
Yeah.
There's just something about, it's almost like a validation of, I can still remember the 90s. Yes, my brain isn't gone yet.
And then we had the whole McDonald's cast.
Yes. So McDonald's.
I remember that.
The pigsty.
With Birdie, the early bird, Grimace, the Hamburglar, all of them. Mayor McCheese, the fried Was it Fry Guys or were there Fry Gals? Or they're both?
I don't...
It's tough because, like, once upon a time as a kid, McDonald's did a weird partnership with Transformers where they had little Transformer Happy Meal toys of all the various things, and it was supposed to be a cross between the McDonald's Club and their food and Transformers, the series, and it was a very interesting blend.
Yeah. And then after that, they went into the Happy Meal toys, which were for the Flintstones movie.
Yes, the 1994, I guess it must have been.
Cast.
Yeah, the Flintstones with John Goodman, Rosie O'Donnell. Oh man, that was Rosie O'Donnell. Rosie O'Donnell was a flawless Betty. Everything. She nailed Betty like to a T.
Yeah.
Now the cast, I'd say the cast in general for Flintstones was
perfect.
I remember seeing that in the drive-in, and it was a phenomenal movie from what I remember.
I haven't seen it in years. Maybe that might be a good movie night at some point.
Yeah. I don't know. Is it something you want to have nostalgia goggles on for?
We'll find out.
No, I still remember the movie pretty well.
It was pretty big, and there was a lot of tie-ins back in the day.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I remember the plot and everything.
Oh, wow. All right.
But yeah, that's pretty much it for the commercials I did.
Yeah, they, commercials overall, I'll say, like, there were a couple that were kind of like, very much of the time. But I didn't find that much that was egregious.
Yeah.
You know, because the big thing with the commercials when I look at it here is going, I'm always looking to see what commercials, looking back on, I'm like, they marketed to me like that when I was a kid? Holy crap, you know? But so far it hasn't been too bad. It's been interesting, and it's bringing up interesting conversations like we had about the cereal mascots and such. It's been an interesting experience looking at these ads and reflecting back on them. Sometimes you get things where you're like, oh, that's such of the time, and it would never fly nowadays. But
yeah.
But overall, I'll see this. Final impressions from our viewing experience. We'll start with you, Lyrica, since you've kind of have the mic.
I will say I'll probably go back and watch more Reboot because I mean, it's historical for what it was, and it was still enjoyable plot-wise.
Yeah, definitely.
And the whole series is available on Tubi.
Awesome. And Enzo, any last impressions you want to share from our viewing today?
No, it was good watching Reboot again. I've probably watched this episode countless times. I used to literally VHS record these episodes, just watch them on end, and Reboot was my life as a kid, so it was good to watch again. And as Lyrica mentioned, now I'm probably going to end up watching the series again. It's 4 seasons, and just as a side note, it does get a lot grittier and dark and more. Oh, I don't want to say. Yeah, there's toys there that I have.
Awesome.
I'd say more adult because they were aiming more for a teen audience because as kids growing up. So as you can see, my background is from season 3, and you can tell it's a lot different than what we saw when we were watching in season 1.
Mm-hmm.
So it was good to watch Reboot again. Tales of the Crypt, I didn't watch it that much as a kid. I did watch it a bit, so it was good to watch. And unfortunately, a lot of the commercials were American, so I didn't recognize a lot of the commercials. Some of them I did, but it was still nice to watch some 90s commercials.
Indeed. So, all right. Well, I want to thank everyone. Thank you at home for joining us again for another Saturday morning experience. I do want to thank Mr. Enzo for joining us for the SatAM Club this week.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And also Miss Lyrica of Lyrical Cosplay.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, guys, thank you again. Hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your weekend out there in the world. And remember to keep friendship magic out there. Thank you all once again.
Thank you very much.